This is a Global Tel-Link prepaid call from
Tariq Maqbool,
an inmate at the New Jersey State Prison. This call will be monitored and recorded.
Hello, and welcome back to 1 Minute Remaining. My name is Jack Lawrence, the host and creator of this show. Today is part 7 of the story of Tariq Maqbool. Found guilty of a 2002 double homicide of a man and his nephew after an alleged robbery of $300,000. He would receive a life sentence without the possibility of parole. It's a crime he's always maintained he's innocent of.
Thank you for using Global Tel-Link.
Hello.
Hey buddy, how are you?
Hey Jack, how are you? How's everything going?
Mate, can't complain. Certainly, especially when I'm talking to yourself, mate. So I'll keep my complaints to myself. What's happening in the wonderful world of the DOC?
Well, nothing really. Just a lot of changes. Administration changed, so the new management comes. They're gonna make some changes, I'm pretty sure. So I'm kind of waiting for that. Other than that, it's been really hot. Like last 3 weeks at least, it's been over 100 degrees and stuff. Under 107. I'm talking about Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
So it's been really, really hot, and our air conditioning has been down on this side, but it's still much better than the guys on the old west side where it's just bars. It's hot.
Yeah.
So that's about it. Other than that, everything else is cool. Just working on some of my writings. So hopefully you'll read them soon.
See, one I wanted to ask you, are you in what we used to be called Trenton Prison?
Yeah, I'm in Trenton Prison, New Jersey State Prison, yeah.
Man, that's a hectic. I was doing some reading on that because I was talking to a psychologist who spent some time in Trenton. Man, there's some bad people in that joint.
I know. I live with them.
Talking to you now and seeing some of the people that have been in that place and who are in that place, I mean, I don't know, your day to day must just be.
It's a different place, bro. Let me tell you this fun story. You ever heard of Krasinski? The guy who was known as Iceman.
Absolutely, of course, mate. Yeah, he's absolutely. I mean, I've read all the books about that guy and everything.
Richard Kuklinski is called the Iceman because prosecutors say he stuffed one of his shooting victims in a freezer. Kuklinski appeared cool in Bergen County Court as he publicly described for the first time how he killed 2 Pennsylvania men.
Law enforcement authorities have arrested one of the most notorious contract killers in state history. A self-employed Bergen County man is behind bars, charged with 5 murders, and prosecutors are investigating his involvement in dozens more.
This is unwarranted, unnecessary. These guys watch too many movies.
Okay, back in the day, when I first got here, he was quite, he's getting old. So he used to sit, when you enter the visit hall, there were like 7 to 10 chairs. So he would sit there with his wife. My mother and father would come in, and obviously he's been here for a long time. But I came in 2005 to this prison, so immediately my parents didn't know any better. They just come in and the mom just sits there, the empty chairs next to, his wife. And she would sit there, and my father, then after that my family just started sitting there, and since he was incapacitated at that time, he was on a wheelchair. He could walk, but he needed a cane. And he was quite a large man, so I'll come in and I'll see them sitting next to him all the time. Like literally, it's him, then it's my father, my mother. After a while, they start, knowing each other, because my mother would talk to his wife outside and stuff. And they're just, some niceties and stuff, like, how are you, this and that, how is the weather, all that stuff. So during our visit, sometime my mother would look back. She's like, this place is such an evil place, Tariq. And I was like, yeah, I know, Ma. And she's like, look, they have so many old people. They shouldn't let these people go for old people. And she's looking at him. She's like, look at this old man with a cane. Who is he going to hurt? He's just in a wheelchair. And my father's like shaking his head, like, look, for that nice guy. Like, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my God, you have no idea who
You've got no idea what this man has done.
So you have no idea. So I'm like, and the funny thing is, Mr. Kaczynski, he was Iceman, we used to call him Ice. When he sat, nobody sat next to the chairs. There was a reason why, because we wouldn't sit next to him. But my family, not knowing any better, they would just sit there. And after a while, he had a liking for my family. He really did. So he had his cane. So sometimes they will bring the wheelchair guys first. And if, God forbid, somebody even come there, he will put his cane across all the chairs. The families will come in, they're like, somebody's sitting here. He would just say, matter of fact, like, don't sit here.
He was reserving the seats for your family.
Yeah, he was reserving seats for my family. He didn't want nobody else after a while. First, nobody sat next to him, but when my family started sitting, he would sit. And he would start reserving seats for my parents. He's like, nobody's going to get him because they were older, so he wanted to make sure. And he hardly said anything to me. He just always looked, nodded, and would just pick up his cane when my family came. And when I came, he would just nod at me, and that's it. That's the end of our conversation. When he passed away in prison, one day my mother was, after a while, she said, you know what happened to the nice old man? I said, Mom, let me break something down to you.
Oh, you didn't tell him, did you?
No, I did. I said, you have no idea who this guy was. He was a very serious man. I know I didn't go into detail. I told my brother and my cousins, and they were like, what the I was like, yeah. And when they saw the movie, like, yeah, that's the. I was like, yep, that's the guy. And that's what Mom liked so much.
Don't get your mum reading the book.
No. She's not a.
She'll never sleep
that's
again.
What happens. So every now and then you run into some guys, but it's a rough place, bro. But you
got to make it work.
One thing I'd always tell people that if you're not into gangs, into gambling, into any type of other drugs and stuff, you can live a decent life quietly. I mean, just speaking, in terms of jail. I'm not saying decent life outside. Respectively of the environment here, you have to be, but be cognizant of where you're at. But just in general, relatively speaking, you can live a decent life if you stay away from the main things.
In our previous episode, we began to look at the statements made to police by Andy, Jay, and Zaid. 3 men who would state that Tariq Maqbool was the one who killed these men. These statements were full of holes, inconsistencies, and just utter bizarre statements. And for 3 people who were apparently all witnesses to this brutal crime, there was seemingly very little that they all did agree on. Today, we continue to look at the remainder of what they say happened that night, beginning with the actual murder of Joong itself, and the moments after. So last episode, we made it up to the point where Andy and Jay, as well as the eventual victims, Joong and Mooney, are all tied up and on the floor. Their mouths all duct tape, according to Andy, 5 or 6 times around the head, feet tied together and hands behind their backs. Jay confirms the same. Andy would speak of struggling with Tariq and the 2 African-American men. He says he attempts to fight back, so they grab him and put him in the bathroom. He says, they pulled me over, and they lock me up in the bathroom. While in the bathroom, he says it's dark, but he feels around the room and feels for the ceiling. He says that the tiles are loose, it's a false ceiling, so he tries to get out, but can't. Tariq then comes back, brings him out of the room, and they start beating him again. Now, going back to Jay's statement around this particular moment, he too speaks of being tied up, hands behind the back, feet tied, mouth duct taped. Now, are we ready for some good old-fashioned leading the witness? Okay, anything else happen? The detectives ask. No, he replies. Right now, no. Okay, as you're getting tied up, did anybody get involved in some kind of struggle? Andy, he replies. Andy, what happened to Andy? He was crying, saying, I don't want to die, please let me go. He tried to run. They're telling him to shut up and lay down. He wasn't listening to him, and he runs away. He ran towards the bathroom. Actually, he ran in the bathroom. He went in and tried to get out through the ceiling of the bathroom, but he slipped and fell down, and then continues to get beaten. There's a little back and forth about Andy's beating and how they then managed to get him under control. They ask him what happens next, and Jay says they turn their attention to Joong. Now, I would like to remind you before reading this next part, this is exactly what is said in a recorded police interview. Tariq is on Joong's back, choking him with a wire. And then...
What did Tariq do to Joong?
Tariq tried to roll a wire against his neck.
Okay.
Around his neck and tried
Okay. I'm sorry. He tried to wind a wire?
Uh-huh.
Like a telephone cord or an electrical cord?
A cord, a telephone, electric cord.
Electrical cord around his neck?
Yes.
As he laid on the ground?
He laid on the ground.
Echo again.
Okay, was he able to do that? Put it around his neck? Yes?
He was trying to do it, and then he stopped for, I don't know for what reason, and he asked, and Joong asked for water. He gave him water to drink.
The most incredible thing to me, what I read, was that apparently the choking was going ahead, and then Joong apparently says, I'm parched, I need some water. So you stop trying to kill him, give him a glass of water, and then you guys continue on killing him.
It just, they were just trying to, I don't know, make me a monster. That's what they were trying to, but I don't think this is on everybody, because that statement was only, I think, one person or two people said. Not everybody said that.
No. So I mean, mate, all the
like
statements are so different. Zaid says nothing about water. Now, I'm certainly no killer, but I find it quite interesting that while you're choking a man to death, you decide to stop because your victim is parched and asks for a glass of water. So you get him one. Again, Joong is managing all of this while his mouth is wrapped in duct tape.
As soon as he finished drinking, Joong was screaming, "Please don't kill me. Tell my wife that I killed myself." He was crying, begging for his life. "Take all my money. I don't want to be killed." And finally, I could feel his legs beating against my body as he was choking, strained voices from his throat. And finally,
was he gasping for air, or was he like trying to get some air? Appears to be.
Yeah.
At this point, was Tariq still choking him?
Yeah.
Okay. After Tariq choked Joong, did Joong go unconscious, or did he stop moving his legs or flailing?
Everything. No movement at all.
So back to Andy's statement. Now, the interesting thing about the moment we get to of Joong's strangulation by Tariq, it appears as though the detective is, well, sick of Andy not saying what he's supposed to and just says it for him. They go from talking about Andy's beating and eventually being tied up, and instead of the detective asking Andy what happens next, he simply tells him.
Okay. Now they tied up your hands and feet with white wire, correct?
Yes.
And Tariq started choking John?
There's a point where they're talking about the store where they're saying that I started tying people, and so the officer asks him a question. He says, okay, so what happened next? He said, then the black guy next to me took out a wire and started choking John.
Yes. And after that, they pulled off another white wire, and they tried to choke John, but as John resisted, he managed to free his hands. And after that, he was begging for water because he was thirsty. He said, "Oh, please give me some water." They gave him water to drink. In the meanwhile, the other black guy standing by my side, he pulled off a black wire from the board lying beside us, and he pulled off the black wire, and then finally he started choking him with the black wire.
So the next answer, the question tab, because it's transcripts, there's an inaudible, like it says in the brackets, it's inaudible. So they're speaking, but the transcriber can't figure it out. So I asked her, I said, can we get tape? She's like, no, they're going to look like donkeys when this comes out. So the next question is, okay, so when Tariq finished choking John, he never said that. You inserted my name specifically. He got so frustrated, he actually literally had to say my name.
Okay. And then when Tariq choked John and he's laying on the floor, while he's fighting and his hands are loose, does Tariq tell somebody to do something with his hands?
Yeah, they, he asked them to hold his hands.
And they held his hands?
Oh, no, they did not hold his hands because John was on the floor by then?
I told her, you can see they're going after me for no reason. She's like, yeah, I can see they're coaching the witnesses. I said, okay, how does that? She's like, this looks great.
So at this part of Andy's statement, when you're reading the transcript, it's very interesting. The written transcribed version says, question.
Okay, and Tariq?
And then it says in brackets, inaudible. Followed by Andy responding with, so Tariq managed to get the wire across his neck. Tariq says that where it states inaudible next to the detective's question on the actual audio, you can't make out what the detective is saying. It does seem odd that only minutes ago, Andy had placed one of the African-American guys on Joong's back, choking him. Then the detective becomes inaudible, and then the next thing Andy does is place Tariq back in the position of the killer. Now, do we know what the detective said at Andy at that moment? No. But in the words of my buddy Tony Duke...
I don't know, but I can speculate.
The final part of the incredible discrepancies from our two main witnesses who saw the killing of Joong is what Tariq supposedly does directly afterwards. Huge issue, like the fact of after you apparently killed Joong, you know, Jay says, that Tariq sat down, had a glass of water, and then just left.
Okay, after Tariq choked Joong, did Joong go unconscious, or did he stop moving his legs or flailing?
Everything. No movement at all.
Okay, he stops. What happened then?
Then Tariq went and sat on the chair and had a cup of water. And he left.
He left?
Yeah.
Where did he go?
No clue. Out of the room.
Out of the room? So he left you, the room you were in?
Yeah.
To the where?
No clue. To the main entrance.
So he does have a clue.
The main entrance, or the showroom of the store?
Exactly.
Whereas Andy's saying that you felt for a pulse and then you laughed, saying that he's sleeping. And that's where the police, you can see the police are coaching him and wanting more, because he just says, and then Tariq said he's sleeping. And he said, and then the copper says, did he say, this motherfucker's sleeping? He goes, yeah. He said, this motherfucker's sleeping, and everyone started laughing.
Uh-huh. And then after he finished choking him and Tariq felt for a pulse or something?
He was checking his pulse with his two fingers like, then he made a statement.
What'd he say?
He's sleeping.
Did he say he's sleeping, or did he say, this motherfucker is sleeping?
This motherfucker is sleeping. So, and then they all started laughing.
So, I mean, that's a huge thing. So why is Jay saying you left the room, had a glass of water and left the room, whereas Andy's saying, no, he checked for a pulse and said, this motherfucker's sleeping? That's not a small thing. It's not like just getting a time wrong, or it's a big thing.
It's not. It's humongous thing if you look at it in the realm of the things.
Tariq sits down and has a cup of water and just leaves. He walks out, he's gone. Pretty unremarkable. I mean, apart from this sudden psychopathic snap and choking a man to death on the floor of a phone store in front of 5 witnesses, but other than that, the drinking of the water and walking out, quite unremarkable. So, from a simple cup of water to the line, this motherfucker's sleeping, as the room erupts into laughter. While Jay says that Tariq leaves, Andy does not. Instead, he says that Tariq tells them both not to worry. They're not going to be killed. They're going on a little holiday to Canada.
And then what do they say to you about not to worry?
Yeah, they said, don't worry, nobody's going to kill you both.
Okay, and did they tell you something about Canada?
Yeah, they said that. You're going off for Canada.
Okay, then did they ask you whether you wanted to live?
Yes, they did give us 2 choices.
Okay.
Whether we wanted to die or we want to live.
Okay.
And the punishment for living was that, we have to, both of us together, we have to kill the other guy, which is alive.
Okay, which is Mike?
Which is Mike.
Okay, all right. So they told you in order for you to live, you would have to kill Mike?
Yes.
Jay would also talk about how they're told to kill Joong's nephew if they want to live. However, this part would come after a very long-winded back and forth about how they're moved from the back of the store to the front of the store and back again, with a detective having to remind him that their arms and legs are taped, so how are they walking? So he changes his story and they're carried. And apparently this all went on for an hour. And then they're threatened with death. So after all of this happens, Joong is now dead. The nephew is not yet deceased. That would come later. They're placed into a vehicle. Now, there is even more convoluted conversations about cars, being moved into cars, where money's been moved. Zaid, trying to follow his accounts of what happened after this is just impossible. Tariq and one of the African-American guys going one way, coming back, moving another car, coming back. It's just how anyone could follow it, I don't know. So I'm not going to go through all of those details. It's just too confusing. However, we still need to cover off on a few extra points before we get to the point where we discuss what Andy and Jay decided to get up to after everybody else had left and they were by themselves. So, as I mentioned, after the crime, they're placed into a vehicle and they are driven off. Now, they would drive off, be driven around all sorts of places, be moved from car to car, and eventually end up at this police precinct. Now, they say this is where Tariq gets into the vehicle that they're in with one of the African-American guys, and a gun is produced. And they are told that they must hold these guns. But again, here come the discrepancies. So we'll start with Jay's statement about what took place. He's been talking about the fact they're in these cars, they're being driven to a motel, and Jay says the following.
During that period of time, Tariq took fingerprints.
Explain to me. What do you mean, took fingerprints?
At gunpoint, he told us to touch the pistol.
Touch what pistol? The one he was holding?
No, he took the first pistol from the back, from the black guy at the back. And he gave it to Andy. And Andy was told to hold the pistol. And Andy held the pistol.
The handle?
The handle.
Okay.
And he told me not to grab it from the handle, but put your finger in the trigger.
Okay.
And he put my finger in the trigger. And then he takes out a magazine and gives it to Andy. And he tells him to hold this with a full grip.
Okay.
Andy does that.
So Andy was made to grab the gun?
Exactly.
One of the police officers corrects Jay at one point because he talks about putting his fingerprints on the gun, and the cop's like, "Didn't you have your hands tied? How are you doing this?" And he's like, "Did you not have your hands tied at this point?"
Okay, and what happened?
Then he gives the gun back.
But hold on. Before we go you guys were still tied, weren't you?
We were still tied.
And how are you going to have your hands behind you? How are you going to grab the gun?
I think we were untied by that time.
So they untied you guys?
I'm not sure. Yes. I think.
But now you're touching the gun?
Exactly.
Okay. They make you touch the gun, grab the gun?
When we changed trucks, they untied us. Legs and arms, everything.
Okay. Okay, so... But when you were in the car, did they make you touch the gun? Grab the gun?
Yeah.
Okay. Was it the same gun or a different gun?
I'm not sure about that, because the gun he told Andy to hold, he took from the black guy. And then the black guy gave another gun to him. I don't know if it's another gun or the same gun. That's what I'm really not sure about.
Okay, so now both of you put fingerprint on a gun.
Exactly.
Why would they do that to you?
Maybe to frame us.
Frame you?
Yeah.
Do you know if Joong or Michael was shot?
No, not at all.
I'm actually just looking at the moment of the process of talking about this gun situation. Obviously, there was talking of them putting on their hands on to put their prints on the guns. Now, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but no guns were ever found, were they?
No, there are no guns. There's nothing.
So now let's take a look at Andy's recollection of this moment in time where they're apparently made to touch weapons. So let's not forget that Jay has said they get in the car. He is made to touch the trigger on a gun, not grab it, not hold it, just with his finger, just touch the trigger. And Andy is told to hold a gun, but not only that, he's told to grip a magazine from a gun. Okay, so that is what Jay is saying is happening. This is what Andy says happens.
Okay. Did someone ask about what happened to the other guy?
Yeah, they asked what happened to the other guy, and they said, oh, he's sleeping.
Now, what does Tariq tell you?
Tariq tells us to, motherfuckers, you better stay shut now. You know what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what to do. You just stay shut.
Okay, alright. And then what about the guns? Do they make you touch it?
Yes. After we drove out of here, we made a right turn, and then the black guy from the back gave a silver gun in front to Tariq, and Tariq said, okay, which one of you is touching this gun? So Jay touched that gun, and then another gun was produced, which was a black gun, and I was made to touch that gun. And there was a silver shell, which Jay touched it first. Then they asked me also to touch that shell.
Uh-huh.
So there again, we have vastly different accounts of what took place. Of course, there's some similarities between the two, but some really glaring, obvious issues. Of course, Jay suggests that Andy at one stage is made to grip a magazine, whereas Andy says they're made to touch a shell, both of them. Now, in order to make sure we're playing devil's advocate here, these gentlemen are not native English speakers. English is not their first language, so they could simply be getting confused when it comes to the English term for things like a magazine and a shell. They could be. So following on from this, Andy and Jay are now taken to a motel where they're placed in one of two rooms. Tariq, Zaid and Paul Reed apparently go to one room. Andy and Jay are being watched by Steve Reed in another. Now, this particular motel has some significance because if we quickly go back to Tariq's initial questioning by Detective Russo, Detective Russo states that Tariq spun in this story about being in a motel with his girlfriend the night of the crime. Now, this would be the same motel in which Andy and Jay were apparently taken hostage and money was divvied up. Tariq says that it's just not true. He never told Russo any story about being at any motel. But Detective Russo says, well, I didn't even know about this motel or its existence until such time as Tariq told me about it. However, we know for a fact from Jay's own testimony that on the night of November 2nd, he was with the police and they had in fact taken him to this motel. And I quote, "They took me to the motel to verify if this was the motel we were in." This was on the night of November 2nd. Tariq was not arrested or questioned until the following day on the 3rd. However, Detective Russo states that he still had no knowledge of this motel and that no other officers had informed him about this motel visit. So they are at this motel where Jay and Andy state that they are given $10,000 for their silence. They get their money, each of them $10,000. They are threatened with death again if anyone talks, and then everybody leaves, except for Andy and Jay. They would apparently spend the night at the motel and would in fact stay there till noon the following day. So this entire time they are now alone with access to a phone. However, they do not make any calls, especially not to police. They don't call anyone at all. Then the following day, they say they walk to a pizzeria and call a cab.
Jay said on the other hand that he left the motel, he walked to the strip mall, went to the pizzeria, used the payphone to get a taxi.
Again, at no stage do they attempt to raise the alarm or get help from anyone. Remember, they have apparently just escaped with their lives from a hostage situation where two men have been brutally murdered. So what do?
then went to the train station, then took a train from there to New York City, downtown Manhattan, with 8 million people. And then the first thing he does is get rid of his clothes that were ripped by Tariq and during the robbery, and got rid of everything, and then got prepaid phones.
Again, they have yet to raise the alarm or ask anybody for help.
I mean, it's such a ludicrous story that if you said it to the jury, it just doesn't match. And originally, the police were looking for Andy and Jay for the murder. So they were the people of interest. They were the suspects in the case. Then they went to Mike's store in Woodbridge, New Jersey, looking for them. And Mike got Andy and Jay, and then he took them to his attorney. The next day, after getting their stories together, they went to the police. Why I said they got their stories together, because 8 years later, when I got my discovery, I got this diary that apparently Andy and Jay wrote together, sitting somewhere in their apartment or train station, where they actually wrote the story verbatim what they were going to say to the police. The reason it was provided to the police was, just in case Tariq, remember the Mafia Don, gets them killed, so they will have some way of their words will speak somehow. And that diary never came to the jury because Andy, by that time, by my trial, he had chosen on his own to flee the country.
You have 1 minute remaining.
And that's all we've got time for. But coming up, Tariq Maqbool is going to trial, facing the death penalty. But before even getting to trial, there's a jury selection to do.
And then the fourth question was, since the United States is hit by terrorism, and since Mr. Maqbool is a Muslim who also practices the same religion as the terrorist. And I was like, what the
And as we've already stated, just one of the 3 witnesses would make it to the stand. And I'll give you one guess as to whether or not his story matched his original statement. Also, just on, obviously, as I said, I was reading Jay's testimony at trial. What amazes me is this shopping bag suddenly comes into play. Next time, on 1 Minute Remaining. 1 Minute Remaining is a Mashed Pumpkin production, created, hosted, and produced by Jack Lawrence, with thanks to special guest producer Alyssa Cook. Audio and sound design by Jack Lawrence and Dom Evans of Earsay.